order at 8:08, please. And we need to add one more thing to our agenda tonight. So if I could have a motion, please, to add adoption of hardship exemption resolution.
So moved.
And we put that on as item M under new business. Moved. Do we have support, please?
Support.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Kleinfeld?
Yes.
Councilmember Owens?
Yes.
Mayor Pixley?
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico?
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido?
Yes.
All right. Let's move on to our hearing of the public, please. Our first hearing of the public. Does anyone wish to be heard at this time? Anyone wish to be heard at the hearing of the public? Sir?
Gary Myron from East Point, live at 22370 Hayes. The property I have a question on is 22384 Hayes. It's vacant at the time. Needs a lot of cleanup in the yard. Landlord does not clean the yard up for when residents leave. Right now it's like this, and that's the way it's going to be when people move in. That's the way it was last time, 3 years ago. And the city, I always have to go to the city to get it cleaned up in the spring. Well, since it's vacant, I figured, well, this is a good time to see what we could do with it. You know, there's rubbish. The grass hasn't been cut since September. It's not long enough. They had the tree trimmed. Now there's damage to the garage. That was done 2 days ago. And I'm not sure what she's going to do with that. She lives in Grosse Pointe, or St. Clair Shores. I've been to her house. She told me, well, that was a few years back. She told me if I don't like it, clean it myself. The screen's been ripped for over 5 years. That's in the bathroom. That's going, on my side. Basement window needs to be repaired. Now, the house behind us, that's my view from my porch. There've been several complaints on that one too, is even from the guy behind me. And the overview of the whole, this is what I see all the time. In the summer, there's all the leaves in that, so you don't see that. And I just figure, well, since they moved out, it's about time to get, something cleaned up, and it should be inspected before the new residents move in. Because she's more than likely not going to clean anything up.
So leave your name and your address with Linda.
Yep,
And-
I'll give them the whole package.
And then she can refer it to Mary Van Haren.
Yep, and I have a permission that you're allowed in my backyard.
But those pictures are great.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone else?
Karen Morajan, East Point resident. And so I notice, once again, the petting zoo discussion has not been placed back on the agenda. You guys have referred to Robert's Rules of Order, and I don't know what kind of version you're following, but, when you table the motion, you second it, you pass it, and you say you're going to put it back on the January 15th agenda, and you don't, are you making things up as you go along? You need to put that back on the record. If you think ignoring this issue is going to go away, you are so sadly mistaken. You sit up there and you profess that you don't want to see animals harmed. You don't want to see animals harmed, you do the right thing and you ban these petting zoos. We're not going to tolerate government-sanctioned animal neglect. That is exactly what you're doing. These animals deserve protection. They are not getting any protection. These traveling petting zoos play their form of rules. They play fast and loose with the rules. This is neglect, period. And when we have an elected body where one has a nursing background and another is with the prosecutor's office, I really question what is going through your mind. Why are you looking the other way when it comes to animal neglect? It's not okay. It's never okay. You're not going to find any shelter, any rescue, any organization out there that is going to support you and say, sure, go ahead, use animal control to monitor this. No, you're going to fail with that support. And it's an election year, so remember that. Because what's going to wind up happening is this is going to turn into a public relations
30
nightmare.
seconds.
You know, if you continue to sit there and ignore this issue and you're not going to stand up for the animals and do right by them, vacate your seat because you're not doing right by this community. And the animals, whether they reside here or they're forced to come into this city, you're not protecting them. And you're also violating the Humane Pet Ordinance. Shame on you. There's only one council member who has had the courage to stand up for the animals. The rest of you need to follow suit.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard at this time? All right, first hearing of the public is closed. We move on to approval of the minutes. The first one is the regular meeting of January the 15th. Can we have a motion, please?
Madam Mayor, I'll motion to approve the regular meeting minutes, January 15th, 2019.
Support.
Move and support.
I did have one comment. I don't really like now that we're just doing the 5 individuals addressed council. I know we corrected the one thing last time, but I'd rather see residents' concerns written out in the minutes. I don't know how the rest of council feels, but.
I think maybe we need to discuss that further.
Good idea, though.
Okay. I'm in favor of details.
Can we put it on for the agenda for next time to discuss whether we want to itemize?
Sure.
I'll make sure to put that on the agenda.
All right, thanks.
All right, it's been moved and supported. Please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley.
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido.
Yes.
Councilmember Kleinfeld.
Yes.
Second item is the approval of the minutes from the closed session, January the 15th, related to purchase or lease of real property.
Madam Mayor, if you recall, we've been having such a cycle of having closed session minutes. This has been a regular agenda item, and we actually didn't have any closed sessions on January 15th. So there are no minutes.
Really? We had
Copy
no
and
closed
paste
session.
issue.
Copy and paste.
Okay. All right, then let's move on down to unfinished business, and the first item is the appointment to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And council, besides Mike Lameau, there was also an application that you previously were sent for Cliff Wilson, and it was in your packet last week. So I called him and asked him because he had no specified commission that he'd like to be on. So I asked him if he would also like to be on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and he agreed to do that. Because we need 2 members on that board, and we do have 1 alternate.
You'd like us to appoint both?
Pardon?
You'd like us to appoint both?
I would like you to appoint both.
And what would the date of his term be?
Linda, did you check up the date on that? it would be replacing Alex Truesdale, who resigned back in December, I believe it was.
Madam Mayor, I think it would be acceptable to just indicate that he's going to replace Mr. Truesdale in his term, so we can accomplish this task this evening if we don't have the actual date.
Okay. So I would like to move that we appoint Michael Lameau to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term to expire May 15th, 2021.
And also appoint Cliff Wilson.
I guess I recommend and council approves. And then also Cliff Wilson.
Okay. I'll
Support.
that, yeah.
All right, moved and supported. Please call the roll.
Mayor Pixley,
Yes?
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens.
Yes.
Item B is a resolution to create a legacy commission for the city of East Point.
Madam Mayor, there were some changes that were discussed at the last meeting. Those have been incorporated. I also took the liberty of changing the dates that were indicated in terms of when the board would meet, when council would have to do the appointments, when the board would meet, and when the final report would be due to the council. So it's very limited. So I believe everything's sort of been extended by about a month from the original proposal.
Are you expecting this to exist after the one recommendation?
No, it's dissolved. It's, the only purpose is to make a recommendation. If it was to be a continuing board and commission, then properly it would be established by ordinance, which has the force of law for an extended period of time. A resolution is only for a specific period of time.
And what happens if you can't get the police command and patrol, the firefighters that are residents, et cetera?
Well, remember, we say preferred, so it doesn't mean non-residents couldn't, but if there are residents who volunteer, then council would prefer those. But if there aren't, then you would go to the non-residents, of course, for the employee and retiree reps. I think we corrected the language to sort of reflect that.
I thought we were striking the property owner's part. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The 10th paragraph, or 5th from the bottom. I guess that's easier. We were just going to say just residents. Didn't matter if they were property owners or not. They could be tenants.
Yeah, I do think that we talked about, and I think property owners was in there in other areas. I think it was removed everywhere else except for there. So, Mr. Sabota, if that could be replaced with residents, or just strucken because it says retiree
Correct.
resident.
Eliminate the phrase property owners, but we still want the resident, non-employee, or retiree business owners.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the very final line on that page that says on, Tuesday, February 19th, I just think it should say, starting from on, as soon as practically possible. The last line on
Okay,
the
I
first
see that.
page.
Yeah, I pretty much had a note for any of the dates in here, just because it's a very, very tight timeline. Figured.
And when you
why
say,
set us-
when you say business owners, are you saying East Point business owners?
Yes, definitely.
Does that need to be specified?
I think we talked about it last time that the resident portion of that doesn't mean that they live in East Point. It means that their company resides in East Point.
Oh, okay.
And I think, so on the second page, the first line, just another date thing. I think,
This should be in March. I think I wanted to do March 28th on that one because that week, council, you're not going to have this in February, obviously. And if we move it to March, we've got council going to MML. So I'm thinking the Thursday, the 28th is when everyone gets back.
I think I'd like to just get rid of the reference to date and have it read, be it further resolved, once a membership is formed, city administration will determine the schedule. And that's it.
Okay.
Because we certainly won't know when potential people will be available to meet.
And then along those lines, Councilman, would you want to say that the report is due 90 days after the first meeting of the commission? Or 120 days, so it's not date specific then? Because if we wait until April to appoint and we require a report by June 4th, that's only 60 days.
Administration's going to be scheduling this and sort of guiding it, so I'm not sure that we need to put a timeline on it, because I think you're going to implement one anyway.
If the resolution doesn't pass, we're not implementing it. We'll have to do it ourselves.
Well, I mean, in terms of setting meetings and getting the information to the board members and everything. I just don't think a timeline's necessary for this, but I don't know how the rest of council feels about that.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't think we should put a timeline on it either, only because also if we end up having to use, like, get any other information that, you know, that it might take a couple months to get the information that they need to be able to make a recommendation to us.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think no timeline.
Yeah, I mean, it could just read, at the last line, be it for the resolve that the Legacy Commission shall file a final report, once the Legacy Commission has determined a recommendation.
And the only other thing I had was the same thing I mentioned before. I think it's important for each union to have a representative.
So actually what you're doing is just creating another pension board that we had, that we dissolved.
I don't know how to respond because I've got.
Except for appropriating money, but what's the general purpose? Because you're not going to tell MERS how to invest the money.
The general purpose behind this entire commission is to identify all the options that council could consider at some point, either in the near future or long-term future, to address the liabilities, to gain the input and support of the various interested parties, which would be current employees, retirees, and taxpayers, and to gather information in order to make that recommendation, so when council does decide, they have options available and understand and know that the process has been well researched, discussed, and considered.
Okay.
Then the only other note, I guess, important note I'd want to make is that if a union doesn't care to be represented, that's fine. They don't have to be forced to or anything like that.
Exactly.
And they're not going to be paid.
Correct, and they will not be paid. This is strictly voluntary. And remember, Councilman, we structured it the way that we did to ensure that neither the employees, the retirees, or the residents have a clear majority. We try to make it even right down the road, and then we had the 80% to carry something, sort of like the supermajority for Cobo Hall, when something goes on over there.
I understood that part. How would we even, I guess in practical terms, between clerical labor and court, then we have those three grouped together? How would we determine one active and one retiree? Would only one of each of those be forwarded to us?
Right, all
And we
the,
say yes or no.
all the people who would be volunteering would be forwarded to city council, then it would be up to council to decide which individual to appoint. And I'm glad you're assuming that we're going to have a large number of applicants for this important commission, which I'm hoping we do, and we do have a problem making that decision. Or if council wishes at that point in time, when they see the interest, council may decide to amend this resolution and increase the size of the commission.
Well, I'm just saying, what if clerical gives a name, labor gives a name, court gives a name? Are we flipping a coin for 2 out of the 3?
That hopefully will be the hardest decision that this council will have to make on this issue.
That's my only point.
Okay, do we have a motion, please?
Madam Mayor, I motion to adopt resolution to create a legacy commission for the city of East Point with the recommended changes to be made.
Support.
So, just for clarification, that's with
With the change,
my change then too?
which was,
The one about 1 from each union as opposed
I
to,
think that's.
From Michael
number
and
one,
you.
right?
what'd you say? Sorry, Sarah?
Please call the roll.
Oh, no, I didn't think that was including the increasing the size.
No, so my change doesn't increase the size. It's,
Number 9, doesn't it say that we should, 1 retiree of each of the following employee groups?
so, it was just, so right now there's 3 groups of unions, and 2 people from each group is 6. I was just saying 1 from each of the 6 unions, which is not what it says right now. That's why I was curious before we made the motion if, does that make sense?
Yeah, so it would be 2 from 4, or from 3 groups, which is 6, but splitting it up would increase
The size.
the amount.
No, so then each, sorry, okay, so everyone gets how it's 6 right now though, right, for this section we're talking about?
Yes.
Well, but
So then-
it's 6 because of the 1 active and 1 retiree.
Right,
So you want to change it to 12.
so I'm still saying 6, so, hold on. I'm still saying 6, just each union selects 1 person, active or retiree, whatever the union prefers, and just forwards the name, so then it's still 6.
My concern is I think we need to have the same amount as retiree as active.
I do too.
Right, I know, that's what you said before, that's why I was just, if everyone feels that way, that's fine, I just feel this way, I just wanted to make sure you understood what I was saying. I think I'll actually vote no if we don't do that, just because I think it's that important, but, if there's not 3, then we'll move on with the motion.
Yeah, I agree with the way it's currently written. I think because the retiree benefits and active are different, both have to be represented.
All right.
But I do understand now what you were saying.
All right, so then everything but that one is in our proposed motion.
Yes.
All right.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
No.
Mayor Pixley,
No.
Councilmember DeMonico.
No.
Our next item is the structural changes to enhance financial controls. Mr. Sabota?
Madam Mayor, this was originally appearing before council back on October the 2nd, and the council postponed action until the city manager was in place to essentially review internal controls and make recommendations. I've had the opportunity to review internal controls, including the purchasing ordinance, and I believe that the current purchasing ordinance as worded works for the city. I haven't discovered that we've had any issues. My only observation was that the living wage ordinance doesn't really have a direct impact on the residents here, other than potentially increasing costs provided by a potentially small number of vendors, and that there is a rather heavy administrative burden to move forward with that, but at this point in time, I'm not proposing even repealing that particular ordinance. So as I see it, The purchasing ordinance is working for administration. We're used to it. We have provisions in the event that we do have to go over $5,000. The council has the ability to give discretion and waivers. And I'm not recommending any changes in terms of the purchasing. It seems to be working over the several months I've been here, and we've had quite a few RFPs and RFQs in the past couple of weeks, and I don't see any need for a recommendation to the purchasing ordinance. I did provide council the GFOA's book on audit committees probably a couple of months ago to hopefully expand or present what the GFOA's argument was on that. I don't have a position one way or the other as to whether or not council should form an audit committee. Council needs to be comfortable as to who's sitting on that audit committee, is able to receive the information from the auditors, and then pass the information along to the council as a whole. And also that audit committee needs to be able to receive recommendations from the city council and pass that information directly to the auditors themselves. So that's really a council committee. The way that is proposed here would be to have citizens on it. An audit committee does not have citizens. An audit committee is only comprised of members of the legislative body. So having citizens on there would not be proper.
If I could jump in, actually. So I suggested we put this on the agenda. I thought maybe my email was going to be included in the packet. Actually, here, pass one more. You might need a copy. I was just going back to our discussion. This was before you were here, Mr. Sabota, with Mr. Cotton, which is what is included in the agenda here. And I just wanted, we never took any action on changing an ordinance. I'm not sure if there wasn't support of it or not. I figured I'd just put it on the agenda to see. I was in favor of making the changes suggested in the packet here with just the changes that are in my email that I just passed down to everybody. And I guess we should probably provide that in the minutes or something next time to the public, so that it's proper. I was just saying everything the same except for just number 1, 2, and 3 here, because the proposed one in the packet says 10,000. Just keep that at 5,000 like we have it right now, and then just a couple wording changes here about where we were having 10 days to review before submitting a bid, so that we don't run into what we did with the wayfinding signs, where we were missing signs and all that when we went out to bid, and then we didn't award the bid because we were missing things in the initial RFP. And then also to expand on emergencies, because we've had issues in the past where money was spent as like an emergency essentially, I think, and we didn't really have a summary of costs or anything, so just to have a little more specific wording. So my recommendation would be just to make these changes and just bring up the ordinance change at the next meeting if the rest of council would like to do so, and if Mr. Albright thinks he has enough time to do so.
If I could sort of add to the discussion, I'm not familiar with any community where the legislative body reviews bid documents before they're actually released. And I'm thinking from what I've observed during my short tenure here is we work on documents, bid documents, when we have a chance. And sometimes based on dual, triple, quadruple responsibilities, windows are limited. And we may be able to work on bids during a 2-week period and then have to devote attention to something else. So I think that could potentially lengthen the time frame that the city would be taking in order to go out for bid. But I don't have any problems contacting the local communities to see if that is in their ordinances as well. Like I said, I don't have a problem with the $5,000 limit. It's just having city council pre-approve
Nope. Hold on,
bids.
if I could jump in, yes, yes, it'll lengthen it by 10 days maximum, because I'm saying, you're ready to put it on mitten, just forward it to council, and 10 days later, put it on mitten. If you hear from none of us, but if we have just a minor question at least before we go out to bid, as opposed to going out to bid, and then later we're like, wait, why did we not have this in that document? Or even just a question before it goes out, just so council knows what's going on. That's all. No, like, approval needed at the council table. So 10 days maximum. If you're ready to put it on mitten, just forward it to us, and then 10 days later, it's on mitten.
That's a little loose in terms of council as a body has to make a decision at a public meeting, and we would potentially be acting on quote-unquote decisions made by individual council members, or maybe 2 out of 5 council members, without having a public deliberation on it, and I'd be concerned whether or not that would even be proper.
So for the wayfinding signs, we're saying administration comes up with all the signs that we need to have. There wasn't a dog park sign included. If someone if I say I emailed you and was like, oh, looks like we forgot the dog park sign, and you say, yes, that was just an oversight, and you include it, I personally don't think that's if you decide that you want to include it as the city manager. Now, if you disagree with me, then yes, it'd need to be brought up here, but I don't believe that breaks the spirit of the OMA with those sort of questions, like a typo or detail of something. It's not changing the whole scope of doing the wayfinding signs.
Well, the other thing that we have to take into consideration is when we do prepare bid documents, we have to put into it a bid opening date. And remember, as I was talking about, sometimes we have a limited window in which we can concentrate on certain things. That may put a bid opening date further out than anticipated, because we may not actually have that window to do the bid opening and the evaluation, the recommendation, because energies have been directed to other areas. That is a concern that I could foresee happening, especially during certain times of the year, based on our current organizational structure.
I think I'd like to think about, because I'm just getting your email with the changes, not direct that the ordinance be drafted yet, but give us time to mull it over and have a discussion at the next meeting. Because I'm less concerned about seeing specifications, but I do know that we've run into the issue where a consensus, well, we hadn't talked about it, but council had decided not to do a project, but we hadn't had a meeting about it, so an RFP is put out and all this work into something that we're like, oh, we're not doing that anymore.
Yep.
Something that was, I think it was the video equipment, perhaps, for...
Or the striping. The striping,
Oh.
decided not to do it all.
So maybe for things like that, just alerting and that could be something, a part of normal reports monthly. The RFPs are being prepared for this.
And I think I've done a fairly good job about indicating what RFPs are being prepared.
And they had in the past as well.
So,
On the second one, though, I'm a little bit concerned about that. And Mr. Sabota, maybe before we even talk about that one, you might review our emergency plan, because the emergency plan covers the costs and expenses that are related to something that's been caused by an emergency. So that's in the emergency plan under, particularly under DPW.
I believe, Mayor, that is referencing the definition of emergency under an emergency purchase. And an emergency purchase does not necessarily mean an emergency under the emergency plan. For example, let's assume that we had 10 water main breaks.
Correct.
And we needed to call in 10 different contractors, and they were all 24-inch mains. Well, obviously, that's going to cost more than $5,000 to fix. That would be considered an emergency purchase. We're still providing water, so we don't have an emergency in town, but because of the cost involved, that would be an emergency. And obviously, I would be informing council as soon as that would come up.
I believe it also, you have to determine that it is an emergency. There's certain words that have to be done And then it also covers the labor that's involved with that.
Correct. And that's, I believe this is
And I
a,
think it's very difficult to ascertain the total costs within 72 hours. I think it's imperative that you get a report back to council, but the 72 hours is really a tough thing to do.
So
He's
I was
not
just
asking
saying,
for the cost in 72 hours.
right,
He's just
exactly.
asking to be notified of the emergency. in
Within 72.
hours.
and then I said as soon as reasonably possible.
possible for the summary. I
No
understood
timeframe
that.
At all, because who knows what it is.
And I actually had want to call it a similar requirement in my previous community. Granted, I had $50,000 spending limit, so it didn't have to come close to something like that. But I already had a procedure in place. Once an emergency spending was declared, it wasn't within 72 hours. It was literally that day that we had to immediately report to Lansing that this was happening.
Yeah, and I don't know if 72, because it doesn't look like, I wish I had a color printer sometimes, because the lighter text is red on my computer. But I figured if something happens on a Friday, you can alert us on Monday.
Monday.
If you're dealing with the emergency, then I figured that's good enough.
But the council had just decided previously that anything over $5,000 or anticipated $5,000 had to be reported. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I called every single one of them, and the only one that responded to me was Michael, and the others didn't respond until 8 o'clock in the morning. So it was within 3 hours.
I was only awake because I was driving to Montana.
I know he was in Montana, so.
Yeah, text.
I was actually out of
text
out of
doesn't
town.
wake me up.
Okay, let's move on.
Are we tabling this
I was
item
going
to
to
the
say
next?
to postpone till the next meeting, Mayor.
Correct.
Then you'll need a motion.
I'll motion to table this item into the next regular meeting.
Support.
Move and support. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens.
Yes.
Mayor Pixley.
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico.
Yes.
Item E is a letter from City Council to employees. Michael, did you have that printed off?
Yeah, I did pass down a copy of the letter. I know that Joseph included in his report an update of some changes to Administrative Order 18. I don't know if everyone got an opportunity to review that. In that, some of the changes that he's made from previous iterations definitely address some of my concerns. I might have some small comments tonight, but I would like to know what council thinks of the whole situation, because it's just been an ongoing problem in our community with having too much confusion over what the relationship between council and employees can be like and what's not allowed specifically. So,
I go first. Looks good. Ship it. That's all my comments.
Did you get one? Because I have multiple copies somehow. Did everybody get one?
I'd assume this is the same.
No, this is the letter that Michael wrote.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, and it hasn't been changed since,
no, the only thing changed is the date.
okay.
So,
Are you saying you want to do we need to release this letter, or are you okay with what Mr.'s?
Yeah, I'm good with releasing the letters suggested by,
And what about
Right, Tom?
administration? Are you all right with this?
Right, I've sort of revised the order, and I was looking to see, I think we're talking the same language and we're singing out of the same songbook. I've cut down the order by like half, 50%, and I'm hopefully been able to condense it and address 4 main points. Not only saying what can and can't be done, but if you don't know an answer, how you're supposed to address the issue, and then reiterating that there's just certain things that you're not supposed to discuss.
I guess my thing, I mean, I'm fine with the letter, but I don't know if it's necessary. I feel like Mr. Sabota's or the updated order is pretty clear, and I mean, I don't know if we necessarily need to do the letter.
You know, Sarah, I think I agree with you. As long as those 4 items are contained in the chapter, in the Administrative Order number 18.
Councilwoman Owens, what do you think?
I mean, if you change it, I don't think a letter needs to be done.
Do you guys have copies of the order, the new draft of it? Yeah. I do have a copy that I can, if anyone needs to take a look at it. It was in the report.
Does anyone want to see?
You can still give me a second one to have it in my hand, but I read it.
I read it.
I read it on, this was in your report, right?
It's 2 pages. Oh, okay, so.
And the order is drastically different from what existed before. And I believe Administrative Order 2 is also folded in, I don't know.
Well, I wanted to because I felt that the language was a little bit coarse for directing it towards council, but feedback that I received was no, council didn't have a problem with the language, so if you don't have a problem with the language, I'm not going to go changing it.
Okay, originally, because the past order was such a problem, that's why I thought an employee letter was at that point necessary. I'll leave it to Joseph whether or not, if he thinks it would be a good idea to couple the letter with the delivery of the order, fine. If not, fine as well. I could go either way.
But I do respect you taking time out to create the letter, so you can, so it don't be so tense around here. So, but it didn't get tenser till he sent the administrative order out, because everybody already was feeling tense around council, and then when the letter came out, it's like, we're really not even gonna blink at them now. So, I think the letter that you sent out was kind of too strong.
Well, if you remember, council member, I actually didn't send that one out. I circulated something that was authorized by the previous manager. So I have an obligation to inform the employees. So sort of something like I inherited and have to make the best of it.
I think some of them already knew, but it was like, pushed upon them like they're doing something wrong. So that was the whole thing. I think a lot of us know the policy and procedures. I think we all have professional jobs before this that we know what we should and shouldn't do with our bosses. So when it's kept on being pushed, it's like, wow, well, what are we doing wrong here? And so, but I would rather have nothing change, but I would like the directors to, when council calls and asks for information, that they call us back. I am big on that. If I call you for a question to know something, I should get a email response back. I should get a call back. I should not get anything back, because I think that's very disrespectful. If I'm calling for information about something, I think it's your job to advise council in what they do not know and what they need to know. And so I've seen that already. So I would like that to be addressed when you get some time. So that's just normal respect in any profession you have, so.
Right, and I think I sort of address it by saying, if someone's asked a question and they don't know the answer, it needs to filter up to me to either answer the question or indicate, no, we don't know the answer, and we're going to find out what the answer is. It's not, well, I don't know the answer, and I'm not saying anything to anyone. Because if you get asked a question and you don't respond to the elected official, well, essentially it's shame on you, and depends what the question was and what the non-answer was, will depend on how the employee or the department head would be handled. But no, this makes it very clear that council asks a question, they want information, council gets that information, and if you don't know the answer, you better filter it up to your department head or to me so I can provide the information.
I think it becomes really difficult when you have a number of people calling, as an example, your finance director, and he's in the middle of something, and you've got 6 people that want an answer, and they're all different questions, and he has to drop everything on a really important day. And there's got to be some kind of a way to limit the number of requests. So they're not bogged down. I mean, this has happened over and over again, not just with this council. I think this council right now is a little bit better than it has been in the past. But I thought Randy was going to pull out every hair in his head, and I know that Randy was going to pull out every hair in his head because of the number of requests that were going over there on a constant basis. And you think your request is only 5 minutes, and somebody's got to drop what they're doing and call you right back. but in the long run, they also have a job to perform. And if Randy is in the middle of doing an RFP or something, he can't stop every minute when you call him and say, do you remember when 30 years ago this happened? Can you just go back and check that? Because they have a job that has to get done, and there's got to be some way to limit the number of requests. And whether it's going all through you, which that's your job, is to channel those things, maybe that's the way it has to go.
Right, Madam Mayor, I think really the only way that something like that could be addressed is if council passes rules to limit themselves.
Well, and that's one of the things we had to do about 7 or 8 years ago, was that any question related to anything in the police department, the fire department, or whatever, had to go to the city manager, or at least to the department head with a copy to the city manager, and then you would determine whether they had to answer it or not. Because it becomes very, very difficult for administration to do their job when you're out there answering calls every 5 minutes.
I don't know if it's really necessary. I mean, if one of us was complaining because I emailed Randy Blum, if I was complaining that I emailed Randy Blum and he didn't respond to me promptly, to me, I feel like I as a council person should understand that, and I don't think that anyone else is going to be like looking down that they didn't get an immediate response. I think the idea is just, I think what Monique's asking is just get a response. Just get a response in a reasonable amount of time.
It depends on what
Right.
you're
I
asking.
I mean, it doesn't have to be like immediate. I mean, Mr. Sabota is always very prompt with
Well,
his
you don't know what I'm
responses,
asking
but-
until you call me back.
But
That's
it
what I'm
dep-
saying. You don't know what I'm asking. I'm not a I'm a citizen, not only that, but I am also elected official that needs to understand something that I may see to vote on it. I'm not gonna vote on something when the person who's over it is not calling me back to help me understand that. So, and if you don't even know what question I'm asking, if I say, Randy, I have a question, call me back, I should not get a response 3 weeks later. That's unacceptable.
What I'm saying is, as an example, when somebody were to call Randy Blum and say, I need a complete report of the financial things from a certain time to a certain period, that puts him so far behind, and he might be better now that he has his assistant, but that does take a great deal of time, and if all 5 of us are asking for something on the same morning, then that becomes a real problem.
Right, and I do realize that can be an issue, but at the same time, I'd hate to limit it, because if there is an issue, I mean, that comes up, I mean, I could end up having like 10 specific questions on just one agenda item, you know, depending on what it is. So I would hate to put like a limit on how much.
I'm not saying limit it, I'm saying to send it to him, but maybe with a copy to Joseph, because when you send a copy to Joseph, excuse me, Mr. Sabota, but he would recognize that he's getting multiple calls about one particular topic, and it makes it easier for him to ascertain whether this is a common problem among all of the council.
Well, generally speaking, I think that's a good policy. I think most of us typically do that. If I send a question to George, I CC Joseph, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. I don't want to get too far off topic, because I think we're getting into the kind of material that would be appropriate, like if we're not getting responses quick enough or something. That would be a good thing to include in like a city manager review.
Evaluation.
But what we have in front of us was the consideration of the letter, which sounds like is not necessary, because it looks like Joseph is taking the steps to correct the confusion around that, like
That
Ms. Owen
particular
says,
administrative
attention, the
order.
communicate, you know.
Okay.
Okay.
And I can tell you in the short tenure that I've had, to the best of my knowledge, everyone that has contacted a department head or an employee has at least CC'd me on the emails. Obviously, if you didn't, then I wouldn't know about it. But I'm not hearing any complaints from any employees or department heads saying, well, this council member is monopolizing a lot of my time or requesting information that doesn't make any sense. I'm not hearing those complaints. It seems to be working well right now, and I think this council is doing a good job of not only utilizing your time, but also the resources limited that we have in the administration. And believe me, if I will see an issue or a problem, I will notify you, but everything seems to be running smoothly right now. And I'm not putting my department heads on the spot to contradict me, but let them speak now or forever hold their peace. No, that,
Heard nothing.
silent, no news is good news in our business.
Okay, then let's move on to report from administration.
Okay. I need to relocate. And I'll see if I can do two things at one time here. We do have several boards and commission meetings. What happened to my mouse? Oh, okay. We do have several boards and commission meetings that are coming up that I'm hoping that City Council and the public are going to appreciate. And is this my computer? Oh, there it is. Okay. And we have the Planning Commission meeting on Thursday, February the 7th at 7 o'clock p.m. Civil Service has rescheduled their meeting from this past Monday until this coming Monday, February the 11th at 5 o'clock p.m. Wednesday the 13th is going to be a very busy day here with meetings. Sarisa is meeting at 2 o'clock p.m. Rare is meeting at 3:30 p.m. And the Parks Commission is meeting at 7 o'clock p.m., and the Parks Commission is meeting at Spindler Park. Library Board is meeting Tuesday, the 20th, at 4 o'clock p.m. Now, due to the cold weather, the Beautification Commission was required to reschedule their awards ceremony, and that will now be Wednesday, the 13th, at 7 o'clock p.m. here in City Hall. We do have some public service announcements through the Michigan State University Extension. They are sponsoring a series of seminars for home ownership that will be held in Warren and Clinton Township. We have some flyers on the table at the front doors to City Hall, and this information will also be posted on the city's Facebook page, regular website, and the TV scroll. We also have information regarding foreclosure prevention counseling services. Please keep in mind that winter property taxes are due officially February the 28th. We can't accept a payment after that. But if people are having some difficulties in the past paying their property taxes, they may consider taking advantage of this foreclosure prevention counseling. The Small Business Administration is going to be hosting a financing roundtable in City Hall on April the 11th from 9:30 to 12:30, and registration is required. Once again, we have information available online. And this roundtable will give current or prospective small business owners insight into the Small Business Administration Guarantee Loan Program. So this is a way to help you get some funding to start your small businesses. The public safety meeting that was held on January 31st, despite the cold weather, we had a real good turnout, and we did tape it, and for those of you who weren't able to come out because of the weather, it is available on our YouTube. I'd like to talk to you about snow emergencies. I don't know what part of my job I detest the most, whether it's snow or grass, but we can't seem to make everyone happy during a snow emergency. My complaints were, why didn't you ticket the cars on the street? Or why did you ticket the cars on the street? We ended up ticketing 69 cars the first snow event and 122 the second. We're hoping that residents do cooperate if they see that we have a rather significant snowfall to consider moving their cars into their driveways and off the streets, even without having a snow emergency declared. That would hopefully make things a lot easier for the plows. It's very difficult for the plows to move off of their route, and then it's not only they're missing the area where the car is parked, they're missing the area behind the car, and they're missing the area in front of the car just because of the angles. And then the residents get upset. So hopefully we'll all be able to work together in the future so we don't have to issue tickets, and the roads do get cleared. I do have some bad news, however, for the residents. Great Lakes Water Authority has announced a public hearing on their proposed rate increases. And unfortunately, East Point is being proposed to have a 6.3% increase in water rates. Obviously, that will probably be a recommendation forthcoming in the new budget year for rate setting. We do have an open position in the fire department. We actually now have extended the application period indefinitely. Believe it or not, we could not get one application by our deadline from yesterday, even though we're offering well over $60,000 to start. That's very good money, and hopefully if someone is interested in the fire service, that they would apply. When we actually start getting some applications, then we'll officially have to have a closing date to satisfy our civil service rules. I have been in communication with the superintendent, and he has indicated to me that it appears as though the joint meeting with the school board will most likely be Wednesday, February 20th. He is still waiting for final confirmation, but that is the indication I have at this time. I am reporting to council now based on a request that you made at the last meeting concerning the budget which we will be preparing. I wanted to give you an idea as to what the budget document would be like and what the enacting ordinance would be. The state of Michigan governs what the minimum requirements are to be in a budget ordinance. The state of Michigan does not govern what the minimum requirements are to be in a budget document. Now, the budget document is a thick book that is published and released that is very informative to the public. I intend to follow the same format in terms of that thick book. However, I'm going to add a few pages to it because what I'd like to do, and for example, the building department, I want to be able to break down all of the programs that the building department has and really assign a cost to it. So the building department just isn't the building department. It's rental inspections, it's vacant property, it's dangerous buildings, it is your code enforcement. So these are all sorts of programs that are within the building department, and I think the council and the residents really need to understand exactly what those programs cost, and in some cases how much money they make and do they pay for themselves. And some of those programs should. So in terms of the budget document, we're going to look to have a budget document presented in the same format. However, what council is really concerned about, what I understand, is the enacting legislation that council approves, and that the auditor then is required to verify and report in the financial statements at the end of the year. Now, the state of Michigan has a minimum requirement for a budget, and we're going to be looking more at expenditures than revenues. And the state of Michigan says that a budget must be adopted at minimum on a function basis. And I know it's sort of difficult to see if you're looking at that screen and you're sitting on this side, but I can actually see it better over here. If we were to adopt the general fund budget by function, you would see that we would be essentially operating 4 different functions: general government, public safety.
Mr. Sabota?
Yes.
Just hit the plus sign a couple times in the corner, it'd be a little easier.
Plus sign, oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you. Oops, too much.
It's easier, yeah, I was gonna say it's easier to do that.
Is that a little bit better?
A lot better.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Public safety under the state is considered police, fire, building department. Community and economic development is your planning commission under what we expend funds on. Recreation and culture would be if there's any general fund money for the library, any money for the parks, any money for any like a historic or beautification commission, that's recreation and culture. Transfers out in other uses, well, that's money we give to other funds. Everything that I didn't talk about is considered general government. Now, what I did was I actually ran the report from June 30th of 2018. And if council adopted a budget by function and there were no amendments made at all during the fiscal year, we would have been in violation of the budget amendment of the Budget Act one time. If you notice, general government was 0.30% over budget. So that's if we adopted last year's budget by function. The other option is by activity. And I'm actually going to have to zoom out on this one a little bit. Now, these are the various departments that make up the functions. Now, from City Council down to City Hall, those are all considered general government. However, if you adopt a budget by department, you have to identify the various departments. Public safety, police, fire, and building inspection. Then planning, and actually your special event, let's see, what is it, 441? Planning and special events is your community development area. And then recreation and culture is from your 750 down to parks. If we adopted last year's budget by department and did not make any amendments, the courts would have been over budget, the city attorney would have been over budget, the city hall would have been over budget, and special events was over budget, and the community center was over budget because it didn't even have a budget at all. So there would have been 5 violations of the State Budget Act. The third option to adopt a budget, and this is actually to put it into the ordinance, is to adopt by detail. Now, I'm going to see if I can zoom in enough to show the 400 and some different lines that would comprise, I can't even fit it on one screen. When we do a budget and we prepare a budget, we have various accounts. And those accounts relate to personnel costs, supplies, professional services, capital outlays. All of these various accounts are placed into a department and then placed into a function. Whoops, let's try and add this up here. If we had adopted a line item budget and did not make any amendments, there would have been 106 violations of the State Budget Act, because we had several, as you can see highlighted in yellow on the right-hand side of the screen, that were over budget by the end of the fiscal year. Now, if you look at these accounts in detail, what are they mostly? Health insurance. We have no ability to control health insurance costs. Utilities. In many cases, we don't have the ability to control utility costs. And believe it or not, in some cases, attorneys. And that's because we never know how much it's going to cost an attorney to fight a case in court. We can't have him come out of the courtroom on June 30th because he only has 2 hours of time left but needs 4 hours to finish fighting the case. So if you looked at those 161 accounts, majority of those are related to those 3 main objects. Now, how can you get around adopting a budget, having reasonable controls over spending, and not having violations of the Budget Act? Well, there's various options. Number 1, you can adopt by any one of these 3 features, either by function, activity, or detail, and then allow administration to make amendments between either line items, activities, or functions, depending on the level of authorization. And you can put a limit as to an amount or a percentage before council authorization is required. In theory, and actually according to law, the administration cannot make a budget amendment that would exceed the total authorized expenditures by the city. By law, we are required to adopt a budget for the general fund and the special revenue funds. We are not required to adopt a budget for internal service, enterprise, capital projects, debt, or trust and agency funds, yet we do adopt those budgets for all those funds except trust and agency. So we do more than what the state requires. However, the auditors do not verify whether or not we violate the budget because that's not part of the audit. By law, we cannot incur costs without budget authorization. So, for example, if we said the attorney had $100,000 for the year and he was in the middle of a case on June 28th and he exceeded, by law, technically, he should have stopped when his clock hit that $100,000 and no longer incurred any expenses. That's what the law says. However, if we in administration recognize that we are going to be coming close to exceeding budgeted expenditures, remember, we made these estimates in some cases 18 months before the expenses were already incurred. If we can see over time that we may be in violation or close to reaching that cap, then we have a legal responsibility to amend the budget, either through the flexibility that council has authorized in the budget ordinance, or we have to formally come to council with a budget amendment. The other thing that we have to do by law is if we notice that our projected revenues will come in less than what council had budgeted or authorized, we are required to come to council to make an amendment in regards to budgeted revenues. In this case, we really need to come to council because we don't really have that flexibility. We cannot reduce projected revenues because that in turn automatically either spends fund balance, and we can't do that without council authorization, or it will require us to impound, to use a federal term, funds that were appropriated by the legislative body and not use them so that we would not end the year out of balance. So in terms of the budget document that council is going to get, I want to present you the same document that you've seen for years and years, but with some additional information. In terms of the budget ordinance, as we are going through our budget hearings and we sort of get an idea as to what direction council wants to go, we can formulate that budget ordinance, and we can also put sections in there that can control or give authorization to how the budget is amended, if there are specific appropriations that council wants to see, if there are certain levels of specific appropriations that council wants to set. So there's various ways of controlling the expenditures, but also giving flexibility so that we don't end up with all these yellow highlighted areas that will be caught by the auditors. And remember, whatever level we adopt the budget at, that's what the auditors have to audit us at in terms of being over budget and reporting this to the state. And every time we go over budget, we have to file a report with Lansing or with the auditors saying why we're over budget and how did it happen. And in serious cases, we have to file what's called a deficit elimination plan. So hopefully this information has proved beneficial. I did provide council with a copy, and it is available online from the Michigan Department of Treasury, the Uniform Budget Manual. And this is a guide that I've used for many years in terms of developing a budget ordinance, not the budget document, but the budget ordinance, which is the law that we in administration need to follow whenever we spend any money. So other than that, if council has any questions on this matter or on anything else, I'd be more than happy to answer them at this time.
Anyone?
Sure. This was very helpful, thank you. And my initial impression is probably I'm going to want to see us go to an ordinance by activity that allows transfers by detail, maybe with, if that makes sense, if I'm saying it correctly, with a limit on how much money can be transferred between without letting council know. I do want to point to, can you share that table with us? I don't think
The activity one? Yes.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out, I know that you highlighted the yellow areas where we would have been not in compliance.
Correct.
However, that's a budget we didn't have, so there was no reason to amend those areas. So it's a little, it's indicating more error than there would be, because it's saying if the rules existed that don't exist, these are violations that would have existed. Well, we would handle our funds differently if those rules were in place. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I'm certainly taking the amount of violations with a bit of salt in that regard.
Right. And I forgot, council, to say that the way we presently adopt our budget is a hybrid of by function and activity. And as a default method, we cannot print a actual budget to actual report. I have to essentially customize the report so it prints out so we can accurately compare budget authorization to current expenditures. And I'll be working with Mr. Blum to create those reports. So even the financial reports that I have been presenting is not an adequate measure for you to determine whether or not we're in compliance with our budget or not. So those reports will have to be revised, because we don't do by function, we don't do by activity, we do a combination of both. I don't want to say it's not a recommended practice, but it's much cleaner if you do it one way or the other.
That's all I have for,
I just had one item unrelated to the budget, but I do appreciate this presentation. I was just curious, can we just make like maybe even a checklist? Because it seems like this happens pretty often. I know like over this last week, we didn't have the agenda online on Friday. What I've been trying to do was actually just like make my notes on a digital copy. And so, I mean, I was fine going back to paper, but that was nice and then for the public, of course, they'd have all weekend to take a look at the agenda as opposed to just one day. And then the recordings of the meetings, if we can get them just the next day every time. I don't know if there's a checklist of items for each meeting or something. Seems like it's been all over the place before you got here too, Mr. Spoda, but if we can try to get that together a little better.
Right, and some of the things I am trying to create are checklists. You'll see in my report this week of a procedure that I followed from start to finish with the onboarding of one of our new deputy finance director. And there are some things that I observed and some things that I realized, we're not doing that I thought we were doing. So that's why I did a checklist. And even after I did the checklist, I realized I forgot some things on the checklist. So having checklists is a good idea, and it's something I would like to definitely do, not just for onboarding, but for various tasks, so that in the event that we had a mass exodus of employees, at least there's a policy or a checklist that could be followed for the successors.
Appreciate
But thank you for the suggestion.
is that the end?
Linda,
Oh, sorry.
Linda, that whole thing I could barely see, so I'll probably be doing a sit down with you, Mr. Sabota, so you can probably Friday. See if you have something open Friday, so you can go step by step. Because I didn't get to, my eyes are really bad, so I'd rather sit down and you do a one-on-one with me.
That's
Is that
fine. I can appreciate bad eyesight.
Thank you. Well, good job. Thank you.
Anything else? Let's move on to our finance director.
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council. As has been referenced a couple times, the new Deputy Finance Director did start yesterday. He came back today, so that's always a good sign. So I'm very happy that he is on board. The other item is, at the end of January, we received the second half of the state payment for the additional road money. $173,768 came in. That was all put into local streets, and that has helped build the local street fund back up to a position where we're comfortable to start doing work again.
How much more was that than the previous year?
Last year's special payment was a total of just shy of 203,000, so this is 346.
It's like 375.
Well, it wasn't quite 375.
So that's the total was,
So it was probably about 140,000 more than last year.
and that's just because of that last bill
Correct.
that they passed?
Yep. That was additional money they took out of general fund.
And that's the end of the road, extra road money, correct?
Unless they pass a new
Gas
legislation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thought you were saying that's the end of the road.
Well, that's when you stop
end of the
pouring
road.
concrete.
And the major road funding, because we can take 50% of that, no more than 50% from the major road
Yep.
to add to local.
Yeah, and we've been doing that, and that's
So
ongoing.
how much,
This year, we are transferring $950,000 from major to local.
and just as, because we got a lot of people out in the audience and they think that that's a lot of money, just give an estimate of how much Johnson is going to cost
The 2 blocks of Johnston is going to cost, we got the 350, and it's over 500,000. I want to say 526, if I remember correctly, the total cost of the project.
The total reconstruction and the water,
Well, no, that's just the road. Water's already been done, that comes out of a
and the
different spot.
water was about, because you do the water when you put in the reconstruction.
Water main, I want to say was maybe 140 to 160. I don't really remember that one specifically. It wasn't, it's the road reconstruction that cost the money.
So the total of that was pretty much almost all of the donated. We got one other street to do, 2 other local streets.
This year, there's nothing budgeted besides Johnston for local streets.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions? I'm glad your deputy finance director came in.
So
Seems
am I.
like a very nice person.
Yes.
All right, let's move on to Mr. Albright.
Madam Mayor, members of council, good evening. Council is in receipt of our monthly status report. I do not have anything further to add. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anyone?
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to new business. And our first item is Christian versus the City of East Point. Can we have a motion, please?
Madam Mayor, I motion to accept the recommendation from council.
Do we have support?
Support.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley,
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico.
Yes.
Item B is authorization for engineering services for the 2019 concrete pavement repair program.
Madam Mayor, we just talked about local road money, and as a result of the $347,545 in extra money that we received, plus our surplus, we will be able to expend $1.4 million, not this fiscal year, next fiscal year. However, we need to begin bid specs now so we can get a good price. And there was a road rehabilitation plan that was prepared back in actually that was presented to council in September of 2018, and it was a 13-year plan at $700,000 per year. Because of the extra money, we can do 2 years at once, and I'm hoping if this funding from Michigan continues to come in, we'll be able to double up again the following year. So we're recommending that the engineer be authorized to prepare these bids with the estimated cost for phases 1 and 2 at $1,408,600.
Someone would like to make the motion, please.
Sure, and one quick, can you email us the map there? Right, this is a new map you're saying, right? It's hard to,
Oh, yes, I can.
the, year 1 and 2 is the bottom left, like southwest
Oh.
corner, right?
Yes, the year 1 and 2 is actually the southwest corner of the city from Topher south to 8 Mile, and from the western city limits east to David, it looks like. And there may be a couple blocks to the north side of that may spill over. So if you're south of Topher and west of David, your streets will probably be fixed within a couple of years.
All right.
When we do these motions, I feel like it's odd having the 1.4 million in this motion, because what we're doing is approving the
Budget.
so this is for changing.
We're actually going to be technically putting this in the budget for 1920 as well.
I understand that, but we're approving AEW to create plans.
Correct.
Which is, I think their cost is,
$6,000.
yeah. It just looks like we're approving a 1.4 something when it's not the case.
Right.
I guess my question was, somewhere in number 1 said Mr. Pangori responded that if the city could have a savings if the construction costs exceeded $1 million. It seems like we're paying him more money to get a discount. I mean, I'm not, I guess.
Once again, when you buy things in Sam's Club, Costco, you buy it in bulk, you get a cheaper price. In the construction business, more firms are willing to bid competitively if the estimated contract is going to be valued at $1 million. So in addition to doing the concrete slab repair, we're also going to be doing in Area 2 some of the crack and joint sealing as well.
Well, and am I mistaken, their engineering rate is a lower percent if the project is larger? I thought I recall that. I don't think it's in the, like, in this packet of information.
No, that's lump sum fee for engineering, $6,000.
So I guess what I'm asking, if we actually bidded the extra work, would it really be what he's talking about? But it seems like he has more control of us spending with him, because he's saying, if you spend at least $1 million with me, I see what I can do.
No, actually, it was the other way around. He sent me the original estimate for Phase 1 at $700,000. And when I reviewed the financial statements, I looked and I said, wait a minute, we have extra money here. So I called him up and I said, Mr. Pangori, we have some extra money. Tell me what happens if we add Phase 2 to this project, so it's bid at one time, or can I tell you to prepare a bid spec for Phase 1 and a bid spec for Phase 2, and then we'll bid Phase 1 at one period of the year and Phase 2 at another period of the year. And that's when he explained to me, well, the $1 million is really where you're going to get the best bang for your money. And since we had the funds available, I said, well, let's combine, get 2 years out of the way. Actually, you can think of it as last year and this year, so we can be caught up on our 13-year plan, and hopefully this discount essentially will be realized, because you're looking at a $1.4 million concrete project.
Okay, so I guess what I was also asking was, it seemed like it was two bids did at one time.
It's two areas being bid at one time and combined into one project. When this was laid out to council in September, it was 13 areas in 13 separate years, bid 13 separate times.
Okay, thank you for
Oh,
explaining.
is this, this map then was in our,
September
that's it.
4th.
Oh, okay.
Do you still need it emailed?
You can email it
Probably
to
not,
me.
but if you think about it.
Okay.
All right, can we get a motion, please?
I think we actually have one from DeMonico. I never heard a second, though.
Support?
But I think you were concerned about the wording of it.
Oh, Mr. Kleinfeld.
I just wanted to clarify that it's just the engineering services.
Okay.
'cause
I think there was a
And it does say engineering
anticipation of
proposal.
making a motion, but there was some questions that came out. So I don't know if
Correct.
you actually
So-
officially said you wanted to do
Do you want
that.
to reword the motion, or you want to put it as is?
I can read it, that's fine. I'll motion that we approve the engineering proposal from Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick Incorporated for the 2019 concrete pavement repair program in the amount of $1,408,600, and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents related to this contract.
Support.
Move in support, please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley,
Yes.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens.
Yes.
Our next item is to approve the bullet-resistant glass purchase for the police department.
Madam Mayor, there was a question from one of the council members concerning the other firms that were solicited for quotes, and Mr. Altimus, who was working on this back in May, has some additional information he would like to share with council before you take this under consideration.
Mr. Altimus?
One of the other companies that we did contact was Crystal Glass, which is the glass company that handled this building and also installed the security glass that you see for finance. So we contacted them, which is part of my indication that we contacted a couple firms to find out what their pricing would be. The indication we got back from Crystal Glass was they buy the material through the company that we're recommending. I contacted Chris from Partners because he made the second contact, and for the life of us, since it's May, and neither one of us can remember who we contacted. It was another local glass company, we can't remember even if we had a conversation, which is probably what we had, and didn't put it in an email so we could track it. But we went through and tried to figure out, is there a competing company? Total Security seems to be the leading company on doing this install, and everybody feeds off of them. At the time, when I was going to bring it to council in May and June, I was requested by the interim manager to hold off until Mr. Sabota was on board. At the time, we didn't know Mr. Sabota was Mr. Sabota, but once we got Mr. Sabota on board, unfortunately, I was in process of a governor's election and forgot all about it until the deputy chief brought it back to my attention. The glass is in horrible shape, and we need to get something accomplished. So the delay is twofold. Unfortunately, neither one of us, Chris or myself, can remember who we contacted on the second one, but the delay is because of waiting for a new city manager and the election that I got involved in.
So I had emailed asking about this, so I just Google searched, and there's two other companies that don't seem to go through total service, or TSS, whatever that stands for again. So that's why I was asking. Seemed like there were others, and you could just probably put in a request through the website even. So that's why I was asking. I just was hoping to see more than one bid.
Yeah, when I contacted Partners initially, we didn't have any idea what the cost was, obviously, or we'd have done something even more formal if we'd have known. That was the name that they came up with, because that's the one Partners has dealt with on most of the bids that they let for this kind of thing. That's the name that keeps popping up. So he didn't have really another one to choose from, so we thought, well, is it something a glass company could get involved in? So we started contacting those folks that I know on the glass side. And Crystal Glass does a wonderful job for us replacing glass here that gets broken. So, but that was the response we got from two vendors, and we then thought, well, maybe we should just move ahead and get it purchased. But then delay happened.
Would you be able to take Councilman DeMonico's referrals into play?
Sure. We can go back and ask them to come out. They came out and measured and everything and did that. And they'll have to indicate whether they install or do whatever that we were asking them to do. Yeah.
Although I do believe that at least one of the companies is out of state that was identified, so.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't know other locations, but the Total Security Solutions does work all over the country, it seemed like, from.
Yeah, I got the sense that they're one of the leading companies that get into this type of work. And I also got the sense from talking to my contact at Crystal Glass, it's kind of a specialized product too, which I think we all get that part.
Right.
So I would say it's up to council's discretion as to whether or not you want to proceed with this, or you are requesting that Mr. Altimus seek additional quotes from whatever companies that Councilman DeMonico happened to identify, or that we may be able to locate online ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'd suggest.
Right, suggest, right.
administration Research, I don't even want to.
Right, it was an example of a couple of them, right.
Like with the tasers, when we talk, looking around at tasers, there's one company that provides tasers, so I understood that we waive bid requirements, but this time it seems like there's more than one reputable provider.
So council, what would you like to
Mr.
do?
Rohib, would it be any skin off your teeth waiting 2 weeks before this is?
No, I guess this has been going on for a long time, so we can do some more research.
I think if we could place on the next
Yes.
week's agenda, I mean, it's fine. I don't think there's a rush, so if you.
Not since I've been working on it since May. I think I've already screwed that up, so.
So can we get a motion to table it, please?
Madam Mayor, I'll motion to table this issue until our next regular meeting.
Support.
Moving support, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley.
Yes. Next item is approval to purchase a second V-Box spreader.
Madam Mayor, if you recall, late last year, council approved the purchase of a V-Box spreader. We actually had it delivered, and it was deployed for our second snow emergency. One interesting feature that sort of got by me during the sales pitch, if you will, is that it actually salts 3 lanes at one time. I had along with a couple other members of administration, had a nice tour of the equipment, and for $20,000, I don't think we can go wrong, especially if they can do another turnaround in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. You can do 3 lanes at one time with one truck. I think that's pretty efficient.
I think that'd be scary to drive behind.
Can we get a motion, please, for a second V-Box spreader?
Sure, Madam Mayor, I'll move that we waive bid requirements. I'm on the right one, right? Yes. Waive bid requirements under section 2-548 of the Code of Ordinances and approve quote number Q-10188 dated January 26, 2019 from Southern Truck Equipment Incorporated in the amount of $20,133.75.
And do we have support?
Support.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley.
Yes. Item E is the collection of the 2019 summer taxes for South Lake Schools, please.
Madam Mayor, I'll move that we collect the 2019 South Lake School summer taxes on behalf of the school district in accordance with MCL 380.1611 et sec and 380.1613 section 1 with no expense charged to the school district.
Support.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley.
Yes. Our next item is the adoption of an ordinance to amend Chapter 28 offenses, Article 7, drug paraphernalia. Can we get a motion to that effect, or would you like to hear something from the chief about it?
Or Mr. Albright.
I can address this, Madam
Okay.
Mayor, members of council. In the process of reviewing amendments to the city's marijuana ordinance, I noticed that the current ordinance dealing with drug paraphernalia on school property could be tightened up some. And so the current ordinance reads, no persons while in any school building shall use, possess, carry, or conceal any drug paraphernalia. Now, the proposed language is much more extensive. It says, no person shall use, possess, carry, or conceal any drug paraphernalia or marijuana accessories in a school bus or on the grounds of any public or private schools where children attend classes in preschool programs, kindergarten programs, or grades 1 through 12. Another reason I wanted to amend this particular ordinance is some of that language actually is in the proposed marijuana amendments, and that language actually comes straight from state law. So just to keep consistency, I'm asking that this ordinance amendment be adopted by the council. And the reason that it's also asked under the emergency provisions of the city charter is based on the nature of this request and that it's dealing with drugs. And I think that the Director of Public Safety would agree with me as well that there is an urgency in having these ordinances enacted as soon as possible.
Can we have a motion, please? Unless you have more questions for Mr. Albright. I think it's a very timely thing. Just today on the news, on the 6 o'clock news or 5 o'clock news, there was a 17-year-old in a Texas town that was sitting there with his mother and using a vapor. And it blew up suddenly and cut his carotid artery, and he died on the spot. Pretty, those things, and they were checking the origin of the product, but they're not all, apparently there's no restrictions on the manufacturer or the import, and so many of them that are being imported are really very poorly designed and made and run into big-time problems. So I'd entertain a motion.
Well, I don't have an issue with the actual ordinances, but I'm wondering if, because I think this one and the next one have to do with the schools, if it would make more sense to have a joint meeting and then I don't know if that thought occurred to anyone else.
No, I'd rather do this because we're protecting, these are our kids involved in the school.
Opposed to it, so.
I don't either. I just wasn't sure if they were consulted. But
Well, I guess personally, since we just got it on Friday and then it's ordinance change, I know it's very important, but I'd hope all of our ordinance changes are very important. I'd rather just have this as the first reading and approve it next meeting. I don't think it's quite, I think we should tread lightly on using the emergency provision so that we aren't doing it too often, and I don't think this would quite hit the level, to me personally. But I obviously think this is a reasonable ordinance. I just like to, I guess, review it a little further, have a little more time since an ordinance change.
That would be certainly the call of the city council, whether they deem this an emergency. I know some of the other communities that have enacted similar ordinances have used their emergency powers in the charter, but again, for purposes of the city of East Point, that would be the province of the city council to make that determination.
I think it's a good idea. Director Rohi, what do you think about us? Just your opinion. I know you're not council, but still, I respect what you have to say.
To be honest with you, these are all standard, and what these are going to do is just enhance what we have, put some more teeth in it. I talked about the vaping ordinance before, and so all we're going to do is incorporate the vaping with the tobacco ordinance. The school bus, the school property, that's standard. A lot of cities are incorporating that, and this doesn't just deal with the schools, but it deals with retailers too, selling these types of devices to individuals that are underage. So there's a number of penalties, and with the third ordinance here, that has to do with the passing of the Recreational Marijuana Act. We have to have some kind of foundation so our officers can go out in the street and write the appropriate violations, because right now we have nothing. If somebody's in a car that's or actually smoking marijuana in a vehicle, we have nothing to write them under. Same goes if you go to a home and they're growing more than 12 plants or possessing more than 10 ounces of marijuana in a home, or if someone's possessing over 2.5 ounces of marijuana, we need something. We need some kind of law, to write them under. And most of these are civil infractions, by the way. There's only a couple of these that are misdemeanor charges, but for the most part, they're civil infractions, but we need something, to write the citation for.
And are these changes not against state law right now then? Like, is there not a state law that you can't have marijuana accessories in a school bus?
Right now, some of these offenses, we would have to go for a civil infraction, go to the county prosecutor to authorize the charge, and I can guarantee you right now, their caseload is through the roof through Macomb County's prosecutor's office. I don't know if they're going to want to look at certain civil infractions. We have problems sometimes taking felony cases up there, or some high court misdemeanor cases. But right now, that's what would happen. And even if we wrote a ticket right now for a civil infraction, the county gets all the funding for that. So, but we still, it's not about the money. It's about we need some kind of guideline to write the ticket under, because right now we have zero, because this is a new law. The passing of the recreational marijuana, it's all new. It's all new to us, because, and the sad part is most police officers, they don't even know what a lot of these laws entail, because this is all new. And I'm sure there's going to be more adjustments to our ordinance as time goes on.
Yeah, the city prosecutor's office is better equipped to handle these types of matters as opposed to the county prosecutor's office.
If I could, Madam Mayor, we actually had a rather interesting discussion concerning this entire issue. The way that the law is presently written in the state of Michigan, we do in East Point have the ability to write a state citation. However, we do not have the ability to prosecute because it is a state citation, so it goes to the county prosecutor. And we have also learned that the county prosecutor does not have any intention of prosecuting state citations for marijuana. So what's our option? Well, we can write the citation and give it to the person, and the officer does his job, and the prosecutor doesn't do his job, but the officer then is not satisfied that he's actually accomplishing what he wants to do. So then what happens if we adopt our own ordinances? Well, guess what? The county prosecutor is getting all the money, so if there's any fines from a local ordinance that we adopt, we don't get a penny. It all goes up to the county prosecutor, so essentially he's making money without doing any work. But at least our officers know that if we have a local ordinance that's adopted and they write a ticket under local ordinance, our prosecutor, our attorney will prosecute. They will be fined. We don't get the money for it, but at least that crime will be addressed to the satisfaction of the officers.
So that was, I did forget when, after my conversation with Mr. Albright, that was my biggest reason for not wanting to do the emergency provision, since it is already, the change is already illegal. It's just about how we go about it. I don't think I mean, like if we pass this today, I don't think in the next 2 weeks all the, children in East Point are going to know about this ordinance that we just changed, and it's going, I just want to be careful with ordinance changes and do 2 readings as we're.
Right. The first 2 I don't think are affected by what I just explained. The third one definitely is. We're tightening our local regulations in the first 2, where the state law is essentially silent on the matter, where we really don't have anything clear as this in which we could write. The third one, obviously, we can write a ticket today if we wanted to, under a state law. So if you're looking at emergency, the third ordinance really isn't as an emergency as the other 2 because we have a legal remedy, whereas the other 2 we really don't. But it's up to council to determine whether or not you feel that the offenses that are being regulated constitute an emergency.
I thought you just said we could do a state.
For the third ordinance, not to for the first 2.
Okay.
It's very nebulous.
Wait, how's it nebulous?
It's not very clear.
Well, I get
that. You can make an argument, but I don't think the prosecutor would want to be in court on that.
Okay.
Okay, does somebody want to make the motion then?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I motion to adopt an ordinance to amend Chapter 28 offenses, Article 7, drug paraphernalia, which states that no person shall use, possess, carry, or conceal any drug paraphernalia or marijuana accessories in a school bus or on the grounds of any public or private schools.
Is that the first one?
That's the first one.
You want me to do both of them at the same
All right.
time?
Do we have support?
Well,
That one is,
I'll support, but I have a question, I guess, immediately. Because I just don't, I guess I didn't compare the, to the recommended motion. I don't see emergency in, adopt an ordinance. So are we intending on this being emergency or not with this motion, I guess is my.
Yeah.
I think typically we schedule a second reading, and maybe that's the only thing missing.
Okay.
Yeah, the way the proposed ordinance is stated under the certification, this would have emergency effect and be subject to 1 reading. It would become effective tonight. That's the
Okay.
way the proposed certification is in the proposed ordinance.
Then I think I still feel against the emergency provision, so I would I'll vote no just because of that. I'd rather do 2 readings, that's all. But obviously, if 3 council members would like to pass it, it'll pass.
Councilman Owens, would you amend your motion to make it just a regular ordinance passage? I kind of agree that using the emergency provision's odd.
It doesn't say that, though.
In the certification,
Certification, it does.
Okay.
I can amend it. So you want me to put the word emergency in there, that make you,
No, I'm saying I don't want it to be, just this be the first reading and the second reading would be
Amend it
next
to say first reading.
meeting, so we technically would it'd become law our next meeting, as opposed to this meeting.
I am motion this to be the first reading to adopt an ordinance to amend Chapter 28 offenses, Article 7 drug paraphernalia, which states that no person shall use, possess, carry, or conceal any drug paraphernalia or marijuana accessories in a school bus or on the grounds of any public or private schools.
I'll support again.
Do we have support?
I heard DeMonico say
All
support.
right. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Councilmember Kleinfeld.
Yes.
Okay, let's go on to the next one, which is an ordinance to amend Chapter 28, offenses, Article 10, and offenses concerning underage persons.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to adopt and give first reading, to give first reading to ordinance to amend Chapter 28 offensive, Article 10, offenses concerning underage persons, which would prohibit persons under the age of 18 from possessing and using tobacco products and vapor products and prohibit the sale of tobacco products and vapor products to persons under 18 and would like it to be scheduled for a second reading at our next regular meeting.
Support.
Move and support. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley,
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens.
Yes.
Our next item then would be the adoption of an ordinance to amend Chapter 28 offenses, Article 8, controlled substance, and add a new section entitled Possession and Use of Marijuana Prohibitions and Penalties.
Madam Mayor, there was one typo that I noticed under the definition section, under defining the word act, after the words et sec, it should be as it may be amended from time to time. I had it at it may, so it's just a small typo, but I just wanted it to be correct.
Okay.
Well, then I'll motion that we give first reading to the ordinance to amend Chapter 28 offenses, Article 8, controlled substances, and add a new section entitled Possession and Use of Marijuana Prohibitions, Penalties.
Support. Move and support. Please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley.
Yes. Our next item is the appointments to the elected officers compensation commission. And we have 3 people to be appointed by the mayor with approval by council. And so the first one is to reappoint Harvey Curley. And the second one is for the reappointment of Jeff Lubeck. And the third one is, it's not in here, but would be Deanna Williams. And she's been previously approved to be in the Arts Council. And she had told me that she was interested in this and agreed to do it. And you all know Deanna, she's a lively bubble. And
Let me verify that, Mayor.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think we may only have 2.
you only have 2, but I asked her personally if she was interested. There were 3 positions empty, because the other one you have on your list is Diane Williams, who's moved away.
Okay, so that's what that one is replacing, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
Am I right, Mr. Altemus?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
When do they meet?
We will be working on putting the information together, usually about end of March, 1st of April.
So again, the term, Linda was going to look that up, that Diane Williams had on. I don't remember when her term expired.
I think as long as you reference that she's replacing,
She's replacing Diane Williams, who moved away.
Yeah, because Diane was just appointed the last time, so.
Correct, yeah.
Well, yeah, Madam Mayor, then I'll motion to, as you recommended, to appoint Harvey Curley for a 7-year term to the Elected Officers Compensation Commission expiring April 7, 2026. And Jeff Lubeck for a 7-year term to the commission expiring April 7, 2025. And then appointing Dina Williams to the commission, replacing Diane Williams also?
Correct.
Okay.
We have support.
Support.
Harvey will be 90 years old at the time of, please call the roll.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley.
Yes. Item J is to receive and file Civil Service Commission 2018 annual report.
Madam Mayor, the city charter requires that the Civil Service Commission annually file an annual report. And that report is included, and it includes a summary of, and highlights, if you will, of the actions that occurred during the Civil Service Commission. And if you also note that they do support the observation that I made as city manager that we do need a full-time personnel director.
Can we have a motion, please, to receive and file?
So moved.
Support.
Move and support, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido.
Yeah.
Our next item is just listed as tiny houses, and I think that's Councilwoman Owens.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to add the tiny houses on here, doing some research. A lot of the space that we, demolish and condemn and things like that, I think they can be put into some use to bring income into the city of East Point, a new look going forward. I think a lot of times when we buy the tax reversion, we buy a lot of lots, and some people, we don't always sell them, and I think we can put 3 or 4 tiny homes there and get some tax revenue to help us with going forward with the city and paying things like that. And I think it's just something new. I know Detroit is doing it. I went to Arizona, they're doing it. Some of them are housing for veterans. Some of it is housed for senior living. So I think we can do a little bit more with East Point, just moving forward with a new look. Just probably got to change some zoning and things like that. So I'm just looking towards the future of East Point, and I think tiny homes is something that will look good for the city, bring income, revenue, and things like that, and more businesses. So, and then new millennials too. A lot of people can't afford housing, so a lot of millennials can stay there, and it's affordable. And so that was just something I think we should do going forward. Just some of my ideas.
So, would you like to make a motion then, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I motion that the city of East Point, I motion that the East Point City Council refers the issue of tiny houses to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation.
Support.
Move and support, please call the roll.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
First of all, I think it's a great idea to consider for sure, at least. Are you, just so, I guess, also for the Planning Commission, when they get it, would probably be, you want to ask them about zoning, like, would they be in certain areas, or just change the zoning so a certain lot can allow them, or did you have any ideas on that, or is that something you wanted the Planning Commission to brainstorm, or?
Actually, our planning, the people who work for us in planning, they already told me that it's still residential. So it won't have to be too much changing in the zoning, so, because it's still residential housing. So they just have to get with our planning department. I already talked to the planning department. They said, they already showed me certain parts that it would go with for the tiny homes, and it wasn't a huge dramatic change.
Right, because you're referring to like our vacant lots, like putting them on vacant lots, correct?
Yeah, vacant lots and things
So
like that.
I guess the only change that might be is if we would have to decide, or planning could decide, like, if 1 per vacant lot would be appropriate, or 2 per vacant lot, and then there might be some zoning changes when it comes to like the size of the lot requirements.
Yeah, because certain houses, certain houses have a certain amount of square footage. And so those tiny homes, and those are approved for, each lot is, approved for a certain type of square footage. And since that is not in our ordinance for the tiny homes, which has a smaller square footage, it just needs to be approved, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
So, well, I just had some questions about ownership. So would you have someone buying a piece of property and then putting 2 or 3 tiny homes on one piece of property, and the size of the tiny home and all? But I guess those are all things that the planning commission can iron out.
Well, when I talked to the lady in Arizona, she did buy the property. So like the lots that we already sell to people, she was just pretty much, I'm not saying we have to go to her, but I'm just telling you what she told me how she does it in Arizona. She bought the property and would put 4 homes down there. And so just like everybody else would buy the lots, she would just be buying lots, and then we put it in the homes. She would be doing the building and things like that. So we would just be selling the lots, and we would get the revenue from the taxes. So we won't have to do any building and things like that. We just.
So she's interested in purchasing? Now I'm a little, I thought this was something you wanted the city to pay for, or is this an investor that would be building them?
No, this is not an investor. This is an idea that most cities are doing. I just happen to go somewhere and actually see it myself, and I think
Yeah.
it would be a good
The
idea.
The city would be built, okay, I just wanted to clarify.
No, the
okay.
city won't be building it.
We'd be paying.
We sell the lots. Someone else builds, and
But
then
the
we
city's
get the.
financing the building.
No, we're not doing any, we're not, no, we already own the lots. So just say
Oh,
we own a
okay.
lot for 5,000, they buy the lot for 5,000, but they built 4 houses on that
So
lot.
you just want the planning commission to look at the zoning then?
Yeah, pretty
Okay,
much.
Okay.
You do have a motion in support, Mayor.
I have a motion in support. Please call the roll.
Yes.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley,
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido.
Yes.
Next item is discussion of placing the question of a charter revision commission on the November ballot. And Mr. Sabota, you gave us some additional information you passed out. So
Yes, I
you
did,
wanna talk
Madam
about
Mayor.
that?
I was, it didn't dawn on me until just before the meeting that I'm sure if we're going to be discussing Charter Revision Commission, someone's probably wanting to know what exactly it is and how it works. So I pulled out the section from the Michigan compiled laws on charter revision. I can tell you that in 2 of the 3 communities that I've worked in, I have gone through charter revision. One was a community that formed a commission. They proposed a charter, it was rejected, and then they went back to work and proposed another revised charter, and that was accepted. And in another community, they worked for 3 years, proposed only 1 charter, which was rejected. So I'm familiar with the process, what this is required, and council actually has an option. And the most efficient and cost-effective option would be to place a question on the November ballot as to whether or not the residents would like to revise the city charter. That's the question, shall the city charter be revised? And then at the same election, they would elect members of the Charter Revision Commission, and it is a 9-member body that is elected. And that commission, once it takes office, it's in office for 3 years, and they have 3 chances to propose to the voters whether or not the voters would like to adopt a new charter. Now, the purpose behind a charter revision is to make a significant number of changes to an existing charter. Another purpose, and a legally required purpose, would be if council wants to, if the voters or council would like to change a current elected office to an appointed office, or make an appointed office an elected office. A change like that can only be done by a charter revision commission. If the council, prior to having, if the commission is actually approved and it's seated, council would have the authority to set the budget of the commission, and the commission, like I said, would have ability to spend that money. Obviously would have to hire an attorney, and the commission would probably want someone who specializes in charter revisions. And they would meet on their own schedule. It's an open meeting. Hopefully they would be meeting in the chambers on TV. They would study, they would discuss, and then there would be a document that would be drafted. And once a document is drafted, it needs to be presented to the Attorney General. I believe Mr. Ellsworth is still up there in the office. And he reviews it on behalf of the governor. Normally, they make suggestions as to corrections that need to be made from a technical legal standpoint from the AG's office, and then the governor needs to actually bless it in terms of allowing it to go before the voters. Once that finalized draft has been presented and approved by the AG and the governor, then it is placed on the ballot at either a special election or at the next available election. And once again, the commission has 3 chances, so they can strike out on the first one and bring it back a second time. They can strike out on the first 2 and bring it back a third time, but if they strike out on 3, ball game's over. And once 3 years are up, their term is over, and if no revised charter is approved by the voters, then the existing charter stays. And that's the process in a long explanation.
And as I read the information that was presented, the commission cannot have an elected council person on it, is that correct?
That's correct. This is a separately elected body, independent of the legislative body, other than the Charter Revision Commission relies on the legislative body for funding.
And then when you say elected to those positions, do those commission members have to go through the process of getting petitions signed and everything to get their name on that?
That's correct. I don't recall if there's been a change to allow them to file an affidavit, not an affidavit, but a filing fee. I know for some offices it has. I don't know if it's gone through for charter revision yet, but I'm confident that you definitely need to get signatures.
Let's talk about money. Now, you said how much would this cost?
Let's see. My last community 4 years ago, I think we allocated $50,000. You're probably looking at, I'm thinking close to $100,000 if you want to do it right. Then again, it depends as to how much you're going to be relying on the attorney, because that's where your costs are. If you have staff, now, when in my first community, they actually had me serve as a salaried person as the recording secretary of the commission. So the city saved some money that way, and we were able to utilize the city attorney who was under contract, and the actual commission members did a lot of the work themselves in terms of the actual typing of the documents. I was very impressed with the chair and the secretary of that commission. They really stepped up and did the work because at the time the city was under receivership. However, in some communities, the elected members of the commission may not have the time or the talent necessary, so they're going to rely heavily on the professional assistance of either the city employees or of the attorney. They'll probably, even though the commission is required to elect a secretary, most commissions do end up paying a staff member to take the minutes. But there is going to be a cost, but if the public believes that a revised charter, which is the rules that this city operates under, is in the best interest of the city, then that $100,000 investment would be well worth it. If you would think about it, this charter is presently 90 years old, so $100,000, maybe $1,000 a year, if we can get another 90 years out of it, or 100 years, it's a fairly good investment.
So, Mr. Albright, this isn't included. Serving as an attorney in this capacity would not be included in your regular.
I don't believe so. I haven't looked at our contract for legal services in quite some time, but I don't believe that serving as on a charter commission would be included now. It may be included in some other, fall under some other category, but I would have to take a look at.
Because it seems to me that when Macomb County did theirs, it became quite costly because they had many, many meetings, many, many discussions, and that was, the costs were really run up by the attorney besides the professional clerk that they had to hire to.
I actually think it's possible there might be some conflict of interest there, because if we have, our body has ideas on what we think the charter should look like, but you need to separate yourself, and, you know, so I don't know if that's technically a conflict, but I would think that the commission needs to be pretty independent.
And there are specialized charter attorneys, as Mr. Sabota mentioned also.
We could certainly help in the selection of some possible attorneys that specialize in charter revisions.
Again,
And if I may, Madam Mayor,
what was his name? Fontaneo? You know, he's doing all the things on TV. I know that he was Femininio. He was one of the attorneys. Can't remember whether he was the attorney or, I know he was on the commission.
Jacob Femininio was on the commission. I don't think he's certainly an attorney, but I don't know if he was on the commission just for
And
that.
who was the other one that was, he was out in Shelby Township? What was his name? Mark. He had been the township supervisor for a while. He was an attorney.
if I may add a little bit more, Madam Mayor, I believe I've been stating over the past month, 6 weeks, about believing that there needs to be a need to improve the administration of the city, to separate some of the positions, the manager and the clerk and the assistant manager from the deputy clerk. And I was prepared to present to council charter amendments just on those particular matters. And you sort of have to act on those sooner rather than later to make it to the November ballot and to give the Attorney General time to review. However, if the council looks to be moving in the direction of approving a charter revision question on the November ballot, then I am definitely going to hold off and not proposing any charter amendments because I don't want to confuse the issue. Could wait 3 years if I'm still here, and we'll see what happens. But I from a practical standpoint, I do believe that a charter revision is necessary, and I'd be more than happy to assist and provide input to a commission should it be chosen. However, if council is inclined to stay with the main structure of the current charter, then I would like to at least get some indication so I could present the proposed charter amendments for council's consideration next week on the agenda so that we could send them up to the Attorney General and have them placed on the November ballot.
Council, do you want to think it over for next council meeting, or do you want to?
Councilwoman Owens, did you have any more comments? Because you put this on the agenda.
Oh, I always want something that we can reconsider, because I've known since Mr. Sabota has been our city manager, he has been seeing some things that we've been doing for the last 20 years plus 90 years or something like that that's obsolete. So I just thought, us learning more about it can be something that we can just, think through just as an option.
Yeah, I think a charter commission is a good idea because I do think we need to update. This is, I think, the first time we've talked about it publicly, so it might be something, maybe we mull it over and next week we might want to do a public hearing or something like that to see if there's any interest from the public at all.
I would like to do a public hearing.
So
I mean, and it's not the first time it's been considered. I always look at Jeff Lubeck because he's been around as long as I have, and I can remember him shaking his head. Yes, it needs to get done at least 3 different times when the topic has come up previously. So I'd like to schedule a public hearing for potential of going for a charter revision and putting it on. So we'd have to do that really fast.
It would be best to do it by the next council meeting.
In the next council meeting, if we can get the information.
Because I really
out.
think realistically the latest, and I think we're pushing it, to send any question up to Mr. Ellsworth would be the first council meeting in March, because we're looking at late March, and that's just too late.
So I guess we would need a motion to schedule a public hearing for the purpose of.
May I ask, Madam Mayor, excuse me, now, Mr. Sabota, when we have the elected body of the commission, what they choose, is that something that comes to council and we say?
Council is, the only control council has over that body is how much money you allow them to spend. That's it. And how much you pay the commissioners for sitting on there. They receive a stipend that's set by council. Those are the only 2 controls that this body has over that body,
So they do receive a stipend too? Okay.
if council so chooses.
And the final revised charter then goes to the voters for approval.
Thank you.
And they have to approve it in total,
Correct. However, there is a provision that allows, I'm just going to throw out a wild example. Right now, Mayor, you're elected separately, correct? Let's assume that the proposed charter has two options, one where the mayor is elected separately and one where the mayor is a member of council and elected by council. Those two questions would be placed on the ballot, and the one that receives the most votes would be the revised charter that would be adopted. So there's variations, but essentially the whole document is what would be voted on, unless there is an option.
Madam, what's the date of our next meeting?
19.
19th. Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing for February 19th, 2019, to seek public input regarding the formation of a charter commission.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley,
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico, Councilmember Owens.
Yes.
And then we have one more item, and that relates to the adoption of the hardship exemption resolution.
And I do apologize, Madam Mayor, this item just didn't want to make it to the agenda. We left it off in the office, and we forgot to bring it to your attention when we made the original motion to approve the agenda. What we did was we surveyed the surrounding communities, Mr. Edwards did, and determined in terms of the asset test that we may want to move to more scalable, so it sort of depends on people's ability to pay more than how much money they have. So if you have a quote-unquote high tax bill and you have a lot of money, it may be easier for you to pay than if you had a high tax bill and a low amount of money available. So Mr. Edwards is recommending that council adopt this new hardship guideline.
Do we have a motion, please?
Is there any reason we can't approve this next meeting? Because, I mean, I didn't really
There's a,
Well, we sort of,
any time.
well, it sort of makes it difficult because we have to have these applications available for the public. They need to apply before the Board of Review, and the Board of Review's meeting early March. So you have to give them adequate time to have this application available. I don't want to be in a position where we didn't give the people opportunity to file their hardship exemptions, and you need documentation that you have to put together as well.
Well, I'm asking because this isn't the typical chain. Each year, we bump up the numbers in the
Households, well, that's covered by state law. We don't have a choice there.
Right.
The area where the council does have a choice is the asset level test.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. We just got this yesterday, and I'll be honest, I didn't have time since yesterday to review this properly. That's why one day is not enough for this big of a change. If it was what we do each year, sure.
so we would still have time to get it to them by March.
If
I know
council's
it's
more,
very tight.
if council's more comfortable going back to the old 10,000 asset level test, I say we need to have this moved today. If you're not comfortable making the change, we can go back to the old hardship test and then consider a change for next
I
year.
think this is a good idea.
So can
Can we get a motion?
we,
then?
Can,
can we review it?
is there any way we could just move this item till after closed session and then come back just so we have some time to review it? Like here, today?
Do we have more
I don't know.
session tonight?
Yeah, we have two quick ones.
I mean, I'm fine with adopting it. I did look it over, so, I mean, it's, for me, I'm fine with adopting
Are
it
you
now.
fine to make a motion?
So I'm guessing
Matt.
what, I'm sorry, Sarah. So what was added to, what was the, from the last time? Because I remember reading this too. So what was just the difference? What was the change? Because like he said, I didn't get the,
It's the asset level test.
okay.
For the last 8 years, we've set the threshold of assets to be $10,000. And I was using the example, let's say a person has a high property tax bill and they have $10,000. Well, they probably don't have as much room to afford that. But if they had a lower tax bill and $10,000, or they got more room to afford to pay that tax bill. So what we're recommending is instead of having a flat level, you have like a graduated income tax. So the more money you have, will help determine whether or not you'll be able to afford your tax bill based on the amount of taxes, and there's a proportion to your assets to the actual tax bill. And I believe it's what,
So
10 times.
It's
10 times.
identified down here. These are all your assets that would be considered.
So if your tax bill was $1,000, it'd be the $10,000
$10,000, correct. If your tax bill is 2,000, asset level's 20,000.
So if you have more than 20,000 in assets, you can't get a reduction.
Correct, because it's essentially 10% of your assets is what we're looking at.
Yeah, I want to read over it.
The theory is you shouldn't be paying more than 10% of your assets to pay your property taxes. If it was a flat 10,000, you could be paying more than 10% of your assets if you had a $2,000 tax bill. Well, you heard today we had people with $5,000 tax bills.
Right, what's the, do we have any idea what the average is? I thought it was somewhere between 1,000 and 2 for a typical residential homeowner.
I actually haven't paid attention since Samorsa.
I think it is probably between around, between 1,000 and 2,000.
So I think if we enact this, then there's gonna be less people that probably apply to be able to get a lower tax bill, right?
Correct?
If the average is over the
Well,
average is definitely over $1,000.
they're just, previous to now, all they considered were just a couple of these things, right?
No, I believe everything has been considered in the past as well.
That's just why I wanted to review it. It seems it was a little too complicated for overnight.
No, you're looking at household income, Mayor. That's household income is number one.
I'm looking at assets, household income.
This is
and
household income, yes.
All bank-
Asset level is number 2.
including the
True cash.
cash value of the principal residence, et cetera.
Excluding. So in other words, if you own a second house, that's included. And if you own a car, that's excluded. Primary vehicle. If you own a classic car, well, that's going to be included.
And so what needs to be out? You're saying we have a timeline on,
We have to have an application, and the application has to come with the actual policy. And
can it not vary between, 'cause when are all the meetings for the Board of Review?
the first one is first Tuesday, March 5th, I want to say? That sounds right. I think it's Tuesday, March the 5th.
So
Is
if
that
we
when
just
their
didn't-
board of review is?
Correct.
So if we just didn't have it in time for then, could be in,
By law, we're required to have this adopted in time. Yes, definitely. And normally it's a month at the latest.
I think personally, I'd rather still wait and we even just adopt it next year than even, if we've been doing it for 8 years, I don't wanna overnight vote on it personally.
I don't understand why we can't do it at the next meeting. Really review it and do it at the next meeting. It would still give him time to get it printed.
But does it give the applicants the time to get all their documentation together? That's
That's the question.
That's the-
Because it's very
very detailed.
yeah.
Wouldn't it be the same documentation, it's just a different amount of money that they're going up against?
But it's not necessarily the same person. You could have changes in economic conditions, so this may be their first time. They may not be familiar with the process.
Well, even just adding 2 more weeks, I don't think is gonna give them all that additional time.
I'm fine with tabling this 2 weeks. We did get it, I don't know what time we got it yesterday, but I know I saw the email. So I'll make a motion to table this until February 19th.
Do we have support?
Support.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
No.
Mayor Pixley.
Yes. Our payroll and bills.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve payment of the bills in the amount of $3,402,610.
Support.
Move with support, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kleinfeld,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucido,
Yes.
Councilmember Owens,
Yes.
Mayor Pixley,
Yes.
Councilmember DeMonico.
Yes.
We have a second hearing of the public. Does anyone wish to be heard?
Good evening. Martin Sema, Hyatt Laboratories, 535 West 9 Mile in Hazel Park. I'm an approved applicant in Hazel Park. 8 months ago, we were lead applicant that was approved for 5 licenses total, 4 Class Cs that allows us to grow 6,000 plant count in a processing. We're looking to get vertically integrated, and East Point is one of the cities that we're looking into. We think it's a great model, a great city that fits our model. We are looking to grow and process in Hazel Park, put a provisioning center in East Point, not the type of provisioning centers that you guys are used to seeing on 8 Mile with lights and neon lights. We are a different model. This would be a high-end, luxury, clean provisioning center. Our model consists of a medical certified cannabis nurse, a pharmacist. So this is our model. Also, I want to just advise you guys of what we're seeing in other cities. Applicants are coming around, they're applying, and they're turning around and selling before they're even open. A vertically integrated company is the type of applicant all cities should be looking for. And I ask council all the time when I come into your city, I say, look, this is who we are. Please pick up the phone and call Mayor Mike Webb and just say, look, Martin Sema, Hyatt Labs is in our city. Who is this company? Should we look at them? But vertically integrated companies, a lot of councils, and I see it in every city, relationships, business owners that have been in cities for many, many years, they apply, they get in, great. But what's happening is a lot of applicants are turning around and flipping and making buku, and now the cities are left with what? So this is not who we are. We're looking to come into your city, and we provide a lot back to the city and to the council. For example, we're looking at, as you guys were talking earlier, approval for a purchase of bullet resistant, and we give anywhere between $25,000 to $50,000 back to the city. And besides that, we provide to the residents.
You have 30 seconds. I'm sorry, we have a rule here with
Sure,
3
sure.
minutes.
Thank you. Anyways, we look forward to coming to your city and working with you guys closely. I look forward to it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Karen Morajan, East Point resident. I'm looking at page 10 here. Petting zoos, don't agree with Ms. Morajan and have opened it up and talked about it, such as with Director Rohib, and Director Rohib has done research and looked into paying our animal control officer overtime. So shouldn't say that council ignored her and didn't do anything. This sounds very problematic. Councilwoman Owens, your exact words at the last meeting was, well, we're willing to pay animal control overtime, okay? Let's read between the lines. That means we're willing to stick the bill to the homeowners and taxpayers to foot the bill. It's not coming out of your pocket or anyone sitting here. Also, this was not discussed on the record December 18th. That is when the motion was made and seconded and passed to table the petting zoo discussion until January 15th. Therefore, once that motion passed, that was the end of the discussion, nor was any of that discussed at the January 8th meeting, nor the 15th. That means this was discussed in private, not on the record, and without public input. If you don't see the problem there, then you need to vacate your seat immediately. Do I need to explain the Open Meetings Act? In fact, it's not my job to explain it. Everyone sitting here should know the Open Meetings Act inside and out. You do not discuss any of policy issues without public input. I don't think you're going to find a homeowner or taxpayer out there willing to foot the bill
You have 30
without
seconds.
having a say. This is ridiculous. The way you all have behaved towards the animals is shameful. It's embarrassing to this community, and you are just as guilty as those who neglect the animals because you're not doing anything to ban these petting zoos. The ban will happen one way or another. If I need to organize protests, and Lions Club,
Your time is.
that's ridiculous if they come back and try to get another permit. I promise there will be protests.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Good evening. My name is Mary Jane Campbell. I want to speak about the drug paraphernalia regarding the school. And there is no law about the children having the pen or the oil or the juices, as they call it. So I was wondering, like, what will be, how can these children be disciplined? Because a lot of them don't listen. East Point schools are becoming unfavorable. My son is over at Forest Park, and he's in the first grade, and he's had 3 teachers in this year. Why they keep leaving? The answer was that Detroit Public Schools was offering a more favorable incentive package. But it goes back to the thing, like, so if they get caught with this paraphernalia, there is no law stating what's going to be, just multiple calls home if someone gets, like, what is it that you guys can do besides, like, how is this going to be regulated? And how would the school children, if they walking around the school or they get past school, how is it being regulated besides being put on paper? If it get put on paper, then what's going to happen? So I don't know, maybe we should I would like to know how that will be, you know what I'm saying? Because the kids in school, like I said, East Detroit Public Schools are getting a little bit more rougher. They need more type of stricter guidelines. You don't want to make it seem like, of course not a jail or a prison system, of course not, but what type of discipline will these children get for this, for something that doesn't even have a law? So I just want to think about that. I'll be at the next meeting. I don't know to, hear about how that goes, but I do have a 14-year-old over in East Detroit, and he comes and tells me tons of stories. And I just want to know, how would that go? Or is it going to open doors to another problem, and another problem, and another problem, and another problem? So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Hi, I'm Mark Lusky with Winston Traytel Realty, and I'm just wondering when an ordinance is going to be presented, finalized, whichever one it may be, as far as zoning for grow facilities and dispensaries. I know my understanding is there's been talks, but nothing has been done. Is there timeline when it will be completed by?
We can address that in our comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard?
When's the next meeting? Schedule.
19.
Yeah.
The 19th? They're on the first and third Tuesdays. All right, anyone else wish to be heard at this time? All right, second hearing of the public is closed. Move on to mayor and council reports. We'll start with Mr. Kleinfeld.
I just have two quick comments. First, we're trying to schedule a joint meeting with the schools to talk about those issues and how we can support them and they can support us and how we can just basically tackle issues together. And the second thing that I'm going to respond to is something, Ms. Morizian, that you said. Because we didn't consider a matter doesn't mean that we privately considered it. You're incorrect on that. We did not have a discussion behind closed doors inappropriately. And I just have to address that because when you come up and make an accusation like that, I take it seriously. And that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Lucido?
I'm going to try to keep it short, obviously, which I normally do. First of all, the tax reversion meeting has been meeting. We've met probably like 3 times since I think the last time we really had a discussion up here about it. So I do want to put it on our next agenda to have a discussion so I can give everyone kind of an update on where we're at and what we're talking about, because I really want to start like moving forward with turning some of these over and getting some work done on other ones. So, and other than that, for Karen also, the one thing I mentioned, it seems like you were saying that we kind of agreed to have animal control, but I never agreed to even having animal control actually go out and monitor the petting zoos. I have not made any decisions with anyone on petting zoos at all. So that's all I have for this evening.
Ms. Owens?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I would like everybody who stayed with us, thank you. I've seen some new faces for coming out, and it's soon to be bad weather, so thank you for, sharing in this whole process. Now you know how we do things. Also, we haven't been in council because we changed our date, so a lot has been going on. But before I go into it, I want to say happy birthday to Councilwoman Lucido. Today is her birthday. Also, when we were gone, Mayor Pixley had a birthday too, so happy birthday to her. So she actually came out on her birthday and came out to the PACE meeting, which City Manager Sabota spoke. He spoke very well. We had a really good time in the community. A lot of community things had happened. I actually today went to the Barrier Park in Fraser with a councilman, and I really love that park. Hopefully we can share those ideas. As I know me and Mayor Pixley, well, I'm not getting your name right tonight. Mayor Pixley was supposed to go together, but the cold weather was so bad, and she was in and out, the hospital. So I did the legwork for both of us today, and the park is beautiful. Hopefully, we can bring some of those, projects to East Point. I went to a new restaurant. I told them I would give a shout out today. Von Thai is a new restaurant on 10 Mile Road in East Point, and I thank them for bringing their business to East Point because we didn't have a Thai food restaurant that I knew about. And since that's one of my favorite places, I told them, I'll be letting them know and giving them a shout out for bringing their business to East Point. Then we also have Spag Burger coming to East Point. So we have a lot of good things, a lot of family-owned businesses coming to East Point, which I'm very proud of. The public safety director and the chief of police and the chief of the fire department, they did an event, and we was filled up. We had to find new chairs and stuff, so I want to say thank you for that whole event. The Foot Locker opened last week. They had events throughout the whole week. I couldn't make every one of them, but I made a couple of them, and it was really nice. They had women in culture there. They had things for the Boys and Girls Club. They had celebrities there. It was really amazing event to see that in the city of East Point. It's, right on the border of 8 Mile. So if you guys not doing anything, need some new gym shoes, boots, go in there and support these businesses in our city. Also, the dressing, Miss Karen some of the things you said was a lie. I really don't address people that lie because that's not my character. But since you're trying to diminish my character and my counsel's character, that is not something we do. We always respect the act, the laws. Used to be a law enforcement officer. That's all I do. In your reading, we actually said that out loud. That was an option to use our animal control. That's what we said. We did not agree to that. It was something that we talked about to address your issue. And as a council, with things about the marijuana and kids being unsafe, for us to address the issue like that says a lot about council because we're still paying attention to what everybody has to say. And we found a solution, an option to make a resolution to that. We didn't finalize that. We talked about it, and we did that on TV. So, go scroll through your YouTube page when you get a chance, and you might find that. But other than that, I want everybody to have a safe night, and thank you all for coming out.
Mr. DeMonico.
All right, thanks, Madam Mayor. You think Von Tile will still be open after our meeting?
Yeah.
No. Darn. All right, tomorrow it is. Second, I want to mention the Arts and Cultural Diversity Committee. Oh, wait, no. Second, I want to say happy birthday also, Mayor Pixley and Ms. Lucido. Third, then, the Arts and Cultural Diversity Commission is posting at least once a day, I believe it is, on their Facebook about Black History Month. A new person will be featured on each post, and I learned something in the first few. The only president of the United States from Michigan was the one that, Black History Month became a thing under him, under Gerald Ford. So I thought that was pretty neat to learn. Did not know that. So look out for all those. And the medical marijuana question about the ordinance, we referred it to the Planning Commission, and they'll be discussing it at their March and April meetings, and then we'll have it back on the agenda after that at the City Council. I think I forget which gentleman asked that, but, okay, yeah.
Is there a copy of what's being proposed available to the public?
It was asked if there's a copy of anything real quick. You'll have to go to their meetings because they're just discussing the whole thing from scratch. So first Thursdays of March and April, check out the Planning Commission.
Councilman, if I may, Planning Commission agendas are posted online on the city's website.
That too, so.
Also posted by the door.
And then, thank you, Mr. Sabota. I want to say thank you also for going out to the 8K meeting. That seems like forever ago now. It was the day after our last council meeting. The group greatly appreciated you being there. And then also thank you, Mr. Rohib, and the two deputy chiefs, Kaiser and Sage, and our animal control officer, Brian, for having the public safety meeting. I have to admit that is the most people I've seen in the council chambers in quite some time, even on a very cold day. So that was great to see everyone that came out to that. Thanks. And thanks for everyone sticking around here, has been said too. And then just the last thing is upcoming, we have a lot of state of the city, state, country. Actually, that one's probably done now. Check those out, at least get highlights so you know what's going on in your neck of the woods. Ours is on Thursday at 11:15, 11:30 at East Point Manor. Come on out to that. And next Tuesday is the State of the State at, I believe, 5 o'clock. That's what I've written down. Double check that. 7 o'clock?
It's usually 7 or 8.
Okay, my calendar's wrong then. So sometime that evening, check that out. And I think that was all I had. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Okay. I just wanted to answer a couple questions. Ms. Namajian, there is no other council. Every time I hear it, it sounds a little different to me. So what I want to say is very, very serious charge for you to accuse a city council of violation of the Open Meeting Act. There is no way that we have sat behind the scenes and discussed that topic. So we take it very seriously that very rarely do you ever see 3 of us together except at a formal event. So I'm not going to discuss it anymore from the City Council, but to say that we did not violate any type of an Open Meeting Act to talk about animal control and a petting zoo. That just gets to the heart of me when you say things like that. I did want to talk to the person that brought the complaint. It is so good when you have a problem with your house. The best thing to do is bring pictures, bring them over to the building department, be sure they have your name and your address, and ask them, please, to get back to you to let them know what they've been doing with your problem. I'm very excited now that we finally got some extra members on the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I was so excited to see everything that was happening with Foot Locker. This is a multi-million-dollar deal that they were, we are the first city in USA to have the Foot Locker with their new
In the
concept.
world, Madam Mayor.
No, there's one over in Hong Kong and Shanghai.
They didn't open yet, did they?
Oh, I think so.
I thought we were the first in the world. Okay.
Anyway, it's the first one in the U.S., so it's very exciting to us, and to see something happening on Kelly Road that's bringing a lot of positive thing, because I think it's going to have ripple effects all the way down Kelly. So I was very excited to see that. And it was amazing. I was over there, the parking lot was full, so I couldn't go in because I can't walk a mile and a half to get into a place. And I was very excited to see that it was really bringing a lot of people, not just to the Foot Locker, but they were going into Village Inn across the street and so forth, so that was really nice to see. This is Black History Month, and I'm been reading a number of books. The library's got a number of different events this month related to it, and I'd like to strongly suggest a book that is the reading book for the library, for their book club. It's called Another Brooklyn. Very interesting, very easy book, and there's multiple copies of that book that are available. For your question in the back about how are you going to know about what the law that we were talking about those laws, the consequences and so forth, that's why we're having the public hearing. So we ask for people to come forward so you can hear about it, and we'll have the copies of the ordinance as we talked about it tonight for you, and then you can ask your questions about that. The Planning Commission always meets on the first Thursday unless they don't have anything to talk about, and you always have something to talk about. So meeting starts at 7 o'clock, and it's right here, and if you can't make it to the meeting, it's broadcast. And I guess that's it. Thank you for all the birthday wishes. It was really exciting walking around in a walker. I've only been in the hospital one day in the last year, 2 days, actually, with my total knee. But I was in a cast for 5 months, so I think I'm really making a lot of progress. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session, and hopefully we'll get out of there by 11:30 tonight.
For both purposes.
For both purposes.
Purchase or lease, consider purchase or lease of real property and collective bargaining strategy.
Well, the motion would be for that.
So moved, what he said.
No, you can repeat it.
Final motion to consider purchase of lease or real property, and motion to go into closed session for collective bargaining strategy pursuant to MCL 15.268, Section C.
Support.
Moved and supported, go into closed session at 10:50 PM.
Should we call the roll?
Yes. I know you're in a hurry, Madam Mayor.